In this video, we will leverage Palantir's open-source intelligence capabilities to analyze the many conflicts in Sudan since independence, the emerging humanitarian crisis in the Blue Nile state, and the newly formed government of South Sudan. To begin, let's briefly review the history of modern Sudan. The British ruled Sudan from 1899 until 1956. Starting in 1924, Britain rules Sudan as two autonomous territories, a predominantly Muslim north and a predominantly Christian south. Due to significant friction between the two factions, in 1955, southern members of the Sudan military mutinied and a civil war between the north and south began, lasting until a treaty in 1972 granted southerners de facto autonomy. In 1983, President Nimiri declared all of Sudan an Islamic state, and the country again plunged into civil war. Southern rebels established the Sudan People's Liberation Army. In 1989, Omar al-Bashir led a coup in Khartoum and seized power that he still holds today. In 1999, Sudan begins exporting significant quantities of oil. In 2003, the Darfur conflict begins. In 2005, the SPLM and the Sudanese armed forces signed a peace deal. In the 2 decades of conflict, about 2 million people were killed, according to the U.S. Committee for Refugees. As a result of that peace deal, the people of South Sudan were able to vote in a January 2011 referendum to secede. 98.9% of people voted in favor of secession. Starting in June, armed conflicts break out in South Kordofan. On July 9, 2011, South Sudan formally separated from Sudan and formed an internationally recognized independent country. In September, armed conflict breaks out in the state of Blue Nile, displacing tens of thousands of residents. Working with data collected by researcher Eric Reeves, we can use Palantir to visualize geotemporally the ebbs and flows of conflict through empirical analysis of bombing attacks conducted by the Sudanese armed forces against locations in Sudan. There are over 1,500 documented cases of bombings or strafings. With the heat map, we can see concentrations of attacks in the Darfur region of the south near the Uganda border. With timeline filters, we can see that the violence is highly concentrated in the far south in the 1990s, then dispersed throughout South Sudan until 2003. After 2003, the bombing is heavily concentrated in Darfur. In summer 2011, aerial attacks begin on the border states of South Kordofan and Blue Nile. Using the histogram, we see a few interesting things. North Darfur has almost twice as many attacks as any other state. MiG attacks are in the south and west. Helicopter gunship attacks are concentrated in the west, likely due to range issues. There are over 300 documented instances of Antonov cargo aircraft being used to drop 55-gallon drums full of shrapnel and explosives. There are multiple instances of significant casualties of women and children. One pattern in the data that warrants further investigation is, in Darfur, aerial attacks are much more frequent in winter months, but in South Sudan, attacks are more common in summer months. In September 2011, open hostilities between the SPLM-N and the Sudanese armed forces erupted in the state of Blue Nile. Many reports have emerged from the state that there is relentless bombing being conducted by the Sudanese Air Force. Using publicly available satellite imagery from the Satellite Sentinel project, we can see 3 important events related to the Sudanese armed forces. First, we see that at the airfield at Al-Damazin, there are helicopters that appear to be behind gunships, as well as dug-in fighting positions and Antonov aircraft used for aerial attacks. Next, we have a convoy of SAF armor moving south down a main road in Blue Nile. Lastly, on 20 September, we have evidence of artillery or bombing in Dindiro. Leveraging OSINT analysis capabilities, we have fused UN SITREPs with media reporting to build an understanding of the current conflict in Blue Nile. Aerial attacks begin in early September. Later, we see journalists captured and UN denied access. In mid-September, violence is reported across the state. Later, the popularly elected governor is sacked and replaced by a military commander by the Khartoum government. Reports of bombing continue. 25,000 refugees are reported in Ethiopia in early October, and the last operating hospital in Kurmuk is running out of supplies. Through data integration, Palantir analysts can gain rapid situational awareness of any unfolding event. The graph you see here shows an outline of the executive branch of South Sudan's new government. This graph was created from a variety of open sources, including the government of South Sudan's website and traditional news media outlets. At the bottom of the graph, we see the different ministries that report to the president. A few examples are the Ministry of Roads and Transport, Information and Broadcasting, and so on. You can see that when available, pictures have been added to the different leaders of the ministries. Above the ministries on the right, we see the independent commissions and chambers created by South Sudan's constitution. For example, we have the Human Rights Commission, the Civil Service Commission, and the Anti-Corruption Commission. On the left, we see the presidential advisors. According to the website of the government of South Sudan, only half of these positions have been filled. This isn't surprising given the fact that the government has only been active for a few months. At the top of the graph is the Office of the Presidency, with Vice President Riek Machar Teni and President Salva Kiir Mayardit. Opening the President in the browser, we see some basic information such as names, age, political party, and religion. There are also a number of pictures of Salva Kiir wearing his signature cowboy hat. One thing worth noting on this screen is the Who's Watching This box, where we can see other analysts who have chosen to be notified of any changes made to the Salva Kiir object. By clicking on a property in the Properties tab, we can see the source document that is associated with this property. It is easy to see where in the document this piece of information is tagged. Also, because this document was tagged in Cloakroom, we have a high-resolution image of the web page where this information was tagged. One other thing to note on the Salva Kiir object is the History tab, which contains a detailed history of everything that has been changed on the object since it was created. This is extremely valuable in an open-source environment where knowing the sources of your data is of utmost importance. One other thing we did was set up a document search feed on Salva Kiir. Any new documents pulled into Palantir containing his name will show up in this feed for the analyst. One of the documents here describes Salva Kiir's first visit to the UN General Assembly. It also notes that he will be meeting with U.S. President Barack Obama. This seems like an interesting piece of information warranting further investigation. Searching for articles on the two individuals in the Sudan Tribune yields what appears to be a match. There are now two options for bringing the document into the workspace. The first is to click the Import button. This brings the text of the document into Palantir for us to tag. The other option is to tag the document in Firefox using the Cloakroom application. The title of this document looks like a good title for a meeting. We can also tag Salva Kiir. Note that the system searches for objects that may be related to the highlighted text string to avoid creating duplicate objects. We'll use the existing Salva Kiir object. We can also fix the spelling of Barack Obama's name and tag him. Cloakroom allows us to do linking in the browser, so we can link Salva Kiir and Obama to this meeting. After importing this information, we can also simply drag and drop this picture onto the meeting object to save it as attached media. You may have noticed that the main topic of Salva Kiir's conversation with President Obama was corruption. While compiling information to get this graph, we found one potential instance of corruption in the form of a potentially fraudulent degree. Oye Dungajak is currently Sudan's Minister of National Security. Opening him in the browser, we see that there are 3 colleges listed under Education. Looking at the Properties tab, we can see that the source of this information is a document titled National Security. Within this document, We see that he received a bachelor's degree in business administration from Preston University, which is apparently located in the United States. Opening Preston in the browser, we see that there is one other article on Preston from the Chronicle of Higher Education describing a series of teachers who were listed as faculty on Preston's website but had no association with the school. Attached to this document are pictures of the abandoned building that the college claims to be located in and the placard on the door of their so-called classroom. Clearly, these are not things one would associate with a legitimate university. In this demonstration, we have used Palantir's open-source analysis capabilities to analyze conflict in Sudan and the formation of South Sudan. Thank you for watching.